Hey there, folks. My name is Lucas Martin. I'm our business development manager here at ARC Advisory Group. Our analysts make it a priority to monitor the key technology changes, vertical industries, and any regional trends impacting the global business environment as a whole. This is a new market update segment where I'll pick the minds of our industry experts here at ARC Advisory Group. We'll chat about the scope of the market, the supplier landscape, key growth and success factors, and any key trends they may have discovered through their research. Now, let's not waste any more of your time and hop right into the interview. Hey there, folks, and welcome back to another market update episode. Today, I'm joined by Steve Banker, a senior analyst here at ARC Advisory Group. Steve recently finished a 2023 global market analysis report on global trade compliance systems, and I wanted to set up some time to share a little bit more with you folks. Steve, thanks so much for the time today.
Absolutely.
So Steve, why don't we just start with the overall scope of this market analysis report, how you maybe define this specific market?
Yeah, well, like it says, it's focused on trade compliance. And so compliance around trade. And that really falls into sort of two categories. One is a financial category. Are companies paying the right tariffs and customs when they do importing and exporting? And the second are regulations that are not financial in nature, but that governments take very, very seriously. For example, there's restricted parties regulations. A U.S. company or any company that does business in the United States cannot do business with North Korea. They can't do business with Iran. And the fines for violating that can be massive.
Absolutely. So can you maybe touch on a little bit of the supplier landscape for this market?
Yeah. So there are some of the biggest companies in the world, like SAP, some of the biggest software companies in the world, like SAP and Oracle. And then there's companies that are specifically focused on global trade compliance. And, basically, the software is sold in different models. Mostly it's sold as software as a service. Some folks sell it as software. And the solution itself is split in two. Some of it is sort of management software that manages the processes, manages the workflows. And then there's trade compliance content. And the content is basically staying up on the changing rules around tariffs. Right now, the tariff on bringing in baby food from Italy is X, but it could change tomorrow. It could be Y, and you have to stay on top of that for your GTC system to work.
Yeah, and it's obviously a very dynamic market, like you had kind of said. Some things can change, weekly, daily, sometimes. So
yeah.
So Steve, obviously, the geopolitical kind of issues the world's facing right now, I'm assuming, has maybe contributed to growth in this market. But can you maybe touch on another growth or key success factor you might have uncovered?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Well, first of all, to simplify things, the more complex the regulations are, the more regulations there are, the more they change, the more companies need a global trade compliance system. And what's happened is we have seen free trade break down, and we're starting to change into a world of trading blocks where it's going to be democracies doing more and more of their trading with democracies and dictatorships doing more and more of their trading with dictatorships. So that's sort of one big thing that's going on. The other thing is environmental, social governance issues are starting to find their way into global trade compliance. So the reasoning of governments is, I'm asking our companies here, let's say in the United States, let's say it's US, to do better and better around emissions. And what we don't want is an American company to go over to some country where they have very, very poor emissions control, have our jobs go over there, and have that company over there create the pollution that they would not create if they were doing business here in the United States. So that's that will be a growing dynamic around this market.
Interesting, interesting. So let me flip that one on you, Steve. Was there maybe a growth inhibiting factor or two you wanted to bring or mention to the audience today?
Well, basically, not every company needs a global trade compliance system, right? If you've got a very simple product, only a few pieces, you only have a few imports, you can do it manually. If you do have complexity, there's two ways to do it. So one is I can get a global trade compliance system and I can do this myself, or I can work with a customs broker and they can do it for me. So the inhibitor is, do companies want to do this in-house, or do they want to outsource it to somebody else and just, wash their hands of really something that's very, very complex. So regulations here, you and me, we would be lost trying to do this. This is a very, very specialized language that they, as an example, if you want to import baby food, right? We would think you would look somewhere and say, what are the fees around importing baby food? It's a homogenized composite food preparation. And every single product you would think of, none of them are labeled in a way that makes sense to us.
And you had mentioned a little earlier too, the penalties, the fines, the issues associated with, an error or a clerical error, anything that small could really cost a company a lot of money. So,
well, so the fines are kind of interesting, right? So because the rules are so complex, every company is going to make mistakes around paying duties. And for the most part, governments say, if you made a good faith effort, I can see how you came to think that it should be classified as A rather than B. And, I'm okay with that. Just do better in the future. Or you're making too many mistakes. You really need to go out and buy a global trade compliance system. So they don't hammer them too hard on the tariff side. But if you do business with an Iran or North Korea, or you're importing goods from a slave labor part of China, the fines can be massive. They could put a company out of business. They could end up with executives in jail.
well, that's kind of a good segue to my next question, and I think the audience likes this one. So let's say I'm an asset owner, I'm an end user looking to purchase a compliance system. What strategies do you recommend to those folks?
You need to think in terms of ROI. You need to think in terms of, where am I going to drive value from this solution? So the obvious one is we don't want to have to pay high fines. That's not really a huge ROI. Following the law, it's hard to put an ROI on that. Mm-hmm. The second one is protect your brand reputation. So if I'm importing apparel and it turns out this is being made by children in pajamas sitting on a mud floor somewhere, that can look bad for me. That can impact my sales. But there's really big money that can be made around companies that engineer their supply chain to reduce the tariffs that they have to pay. So if they go and they operate in free trade zones, if they operate in places with preferential trade agreements between companies, and there's some pretty complicated rules around that. But if they do that, they can save tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Great, great. So the last question I got for you today, Steve, just overall, how can buyers of reports like this benefit? Obviously, there's detailed market share information, but just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it is a report that's mainly bought by the suppliers of these solutions. They want to understand their market share. They want to understand how the market's growing. They want to understand the major trends that could impact how the market goes forward.
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of the audience, Steve, really appreciate the time today. I know you put a lot of, effort, bandwidth, and time into this report, and I'm personally looking forward to giving it a read. Just a reminder to the audience, we'll have links to our website and more information in the description below. You can contact us directly through that webpage. We'd love to discuss how, market data, analysis, trends, like Steve mentioned, can help your company out. So thanks again, Steve. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Bye-bye.
If you like what you saw in this video and want more informative content, be sure to like, comment, and hit the notification bell below. Also, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again, folks. We really appreciate the time, and we'll see you in the next video.